We are here to change politics for good. And I'd say, after European elections, winning that, we made a good start. We then had our leader, Nigel Farage, do an incredible thing, something we don't see very much, putting country before party and standing down in those constituencies for the good of the national interest. I'm glad you agree. But make no mistake about it, the Brexit Party has a major role to play in this general election. Because I don't know about you, I mean, it was a quite bizarre interview that we saw at the weekend from the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn. He was asked a very difficult question, in fairness. The question he was asked was, do you want the UK to leave the European Union or remain? And he wouldn't give a straight answer. This guy wants to be our Prime Minister, asked one of the most basic, important questions about the future of our country, and he thinks he can mug off the British public with a complete non-answer. The Labour Party think they can play both sides. The Labour Party think they can pull the wool over the eyes of the British public. I say they're going to fail. I say they're going to be punished at the ballot box. And I say Brexit Party are going to win some of those Labour seats and send some very good people to Westminster to change politics for good. Do you agree with me? Good. Because that is now what we are doing. We are taking the fight as the Brexit Party to Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party and the Remainer MPs up and down the country. And just look at the quality. Look at the quality of some of those people. I think of Martin Daubney in Ashfield. I think of Michelle Dewberry in Hull. I think of our party chairman, of course, Richard Tice in Hartlepool. Just imagine the difference that these people will make in Parliament as Brexit Party MPs, making sure that the Brexit you voted for is delivered. We need to go out there, we need to make sure that they get elected. Are you going to do that? Are you with us? Good. So, today I'm going to introduce you to a few familiar faces and some people that you may not have seen before. The first, a young man, Harry Gwynn, our man in North Norfolk. Give him a big round of applause. Here he comes.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how I came to be with the Brexit Party and why our mission is more important today than it has ever been before. I got involved and I put myself forward as a candidate for the party because I could see that there was something very wrong in this country, something very wrong in our political system and the way we do business in this country. And the campaign over the last week, the nationwide campaign of intimidation, bribery, and harassment of this party's members have shown me that there's not just something very wrong, that the whole system is rotten to the core. We have a House of Lords that is totally unaccountable and stuffed with cronies. We have a judiciary meandering its way into our democratic process. We have, until recently, a blatantly partisan speaker. We have a postal voting system that's being abused on a mass scale, not least of all here, of course. And we have a voting system that can deliver one party one seat for 12.6% of the vote, and another party 50 seats for 4.7% of the vote. That means that some people in this country's vote is worth 134 times what other people's vote is worth. That cannot go on, not if we are to call ourselves a democracy. So the Brexit Party wants to do things differently. We want to create a new politics in this country. And what does that look like? Well, our leader gave us a good example of that this week when he did something that no party, as far as I'm aware, has ever done in political history anywhere in the world, which is stood down half of their candidates for another party, but actually not for the other party, for something they believe in, for a greater good. That doesn't happen in politics. Well, it does now. The Brexit Party isn't seeking power because we desperately want the baubles of government and we want to tell everyone how to run their lives. No, we want to win the election, to empower people to change their own lives, to empower communities to take control of the direction of their own community. So, taking power back from the EU has to be just the start, not the end of a process where we devolve power down to the regions, to cities, and ultimately to the individual voter. Now, some people say, oh, just let the Conservatives get on with it at this point. Now, my question to those people is, let them get on with what exactly? Because this is a Conservative Party that 6 months ago nearly sold this nation into vassalage, in the words of our current Prime Minister, before he then voted to do the same. So, it's easy to forget with everything that goes on, the kind of entity we're dealing with here. So, regardless, the Conservative Party will overall win this election in this country, and the question for the British people is, do they want to send them back with a totally free hand to do whatever they want? Or do they want to keep them on a tight leash with the reins held by Brexit Party MPs? So, make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, we're in a battle for the soul of this country. We really are. And we've got to ask ourselves what kind of person we are, what kind of people we are. Are we a people that lets ourselves be bullied and dictated to, whether by our own establishment or by the European Union? Everything I have ever seen of our people tells me we are not. And that's why I ask you to help support us, help support Mike and the rest of the party in our mission to change politics for good. Thank you so much.
As you can see, another fantastic candidate for the Brexit Party. I think one of the great things is that we've inspired people that were incredibly angry about the state of affairs. Don't forget, if it wasn't for the Brexit Party, Theresa May would still likely be in office as our Prime Minister. The Brexit Party has inspired and engaged new people to come into politics and stand. I take my hat off to all of them. Here comes another. It's Charles Bunker, our man for Bedford.
Good morning and thank you. Right. So who am I? I'm Charles Bunker and I'm the Brexit Party candidate for Bedford. And why the hell am I here? Well, I can tell you why. I was a committed Conservative Party member. Really committed. I was an association chairman twice. I was an area chairman. I was an Eastern Region chairman. I did one hell of a lot for the Conservative Party, including giving David Cameron his best local election result in the country one year. And suddenly I realised that I could not defend the indefensible. The Conservative Party no longer represented me. They were no longer the One Nation Party. In particular, they weren't providing our politics with the four things that we really have to have. First of all, we have to have compassion in our politics. We have to have competence in our politics. We have to have common sense. And above all, we have to have integrity. Now, a Conservative Party that gives you the Windrush scandal, the Conservative Party that gives you the problems of universal credit, that is a party that does not understand compassion. It does not represent me. A party which for 10 years has allowed 90% of economic growth to go to 1% of the people does not represent me, and I don't believe he represents you. a party which changes the arrangements for student nurses, where they used to get a grant to study, now have to take out student loans. That's not compassionate competence. That's not compassionate politics. It's not even competent politics. Look at the emergency in the A&E this week, the reports. The longest waiting times in our history, and yet that is what the Conservative government has done to our nurses. And let us look at what they did to our doctors. Right? I don't know whether you know they changed the tax rates for our doctors. 60% tax rate you pay if you're a doctor earning between £100,000 and £125,000. That is the highest in Europe. It's not surprising that they are not prepared to work the weekends. They also changed the pension rules. So doctors are now taking, the best doctors are now taking early retirement. Is it any surprise that we have an emergency, a crisis in our A&E? That is the incompetence of the Conservative government. And let's just look at common sense. HS2, 100 billion to take 20 minutes off a journey from London to Birmingham, when we're gridlocked all around our countries and we can't even mend our potholes. Now, those are not doing the things that we want. Compassion. They're not delivering on competence. They're not delivering on common sense. But above all, they are failing on integrity. And integrity is leading to our broken politics. Now, I've coined a phrase for our broken politics. I'm calling it good cause corruption. Now, it's not a corruption where fivers are changing hands. It's where each party, both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, consider the other so evil that their good cause is to stay in power. And they do and they say anything to do that. Now, if you want an example, look at the withdrawal agreement. Theresa May's withdrawal agreement was dreadful. Boris Johnson's is 90% the same. So why has the ERG and all those Conservative outliers that were defeating Theresa May's deal suddenly supporting Boris Johnson's? I'll tell you why. They have put their party before their country, and it is a disgrace. So we need better government, and we'll get better government by the Brexit Party winning. Now, what we know, John Curtis, the very highly respected independent pollster, has told us that the chances of a majority Labour government are 0. All right? Now, what does that mean? Thank God it means we won't be seeing, well, we might be seeing in a minority government, Jeremy Corbyn and his Marxist government, or can you imagine Diane Abbott in charge of our Home Office? Or can you imagine Emily Thornberry in charge of our Foreign Office? No. Now, when it comes to the strength and power of our individual MPs, and I need a glass of water because I'm drying up fast. Sorry, guys, but I'm sure you'll bear with me. So what we have is a Labour Party MP in a minority Labour Party government will have no power. They have no influence. A Conservative MP in a majority Conservative government will have no power. You don't believe me when I say that. How can it be that a Conservative MP in a majority government has no power? Well, look at dear old George Freeman. George Freeman, Conservative MP for Mid-Norfolk, I think it is, very, very good friend of mine, right? He ran Theresa May's policy unit, right? He spent 2 years consulting on her behalf. And yet, when it came to Theresa May's manifesto, he didn't have a single word, not a single input. So how can it be that somebody that senior in the Conservative Party can have no influence? Now, let us reflect on the DUP. Look, a handful, 12 MPs, and look at the power that they've delivered for Northern Ireland. So what we need to do as the Brexit Party is to get that control, to get that, to just a number of seats, and we get the control. And what does that happen? First of all, yeah, I'm finishing. First of all, the very first thing that happens is we can end Brexit. All right, we can deliver the no-deal Brexit that we want to deal. The second thing that we can make sure that happens is that we have a caring and compassionate Conservative Party. The third thing we can do is, for seats like Peterborough, we can make sure that we deliver the extra resources that this constituency needs. And we can make the changes the electoral system requires. Now, I can tell you it is pretty damn horrible being a Brexit Party candidate in this election. I thought the abuse would be bad. It's twice as bad as I thought it would be. It's a pretty tough fight. So all our supporters out there have got to be brave. They've got to be brave too. They've got to join us, because it's only by supporting the Brexit Party, it's only by supporting your Brexit Party candidate will we be able to change democracy for good. Thank you for listening.
Well, there you have it. Tremendous passion on show there, as from all of our candidates up and down the country. Now, one thing I like to tell people is when you're thinking about voting for your Brexit Party candidate for the general election, you have a barometer, because we had those European elections, and in those we had a lot of MEPs, 29 MEPs elected. And I like to think, and I was one of them for the east of England, the best region, obviously, in the country where we are, soft spot. I like to think that we've made a bit of an impact. We've certainly got a bit of a reputation for getting stuck in and making our presence felt. When people talk down our country and slag off Brexit, we stand our ground. And you'll be getting more of that in Parliament if you have Brexit Party MPs. So, please welcome one of those MEPs for the Brexit Party, my colleague, Claire Fox.
Thanks so much, Michael. Yes, we've definitely tried to cause trouble in Brussels, and we haven't stopped causing trouble now that we're back. Not that we're back permanently, I wish we were. Listen, I'm not going to lie to you, and we just heard this from our colleague. The last few weeks have been tough. The decision to stand down candidates in all 317 seats held by the Conservatives to avoid splitting the votes has caused some heartache for those PPCs who were stood down, for activists, meaning that some voters now feel disenfranchised, that they haven't got a choice, and they're worried that maybe we've done a pact with the Tories, we've thrown our lot in with the Tories. So I wanted to be honest about that, because this is a tough time for all of us politically. But that unilateral decision, that was definitely not reciprocated by the Tories. I mean, after all, the Tories split the vote here in Peterborough, and they still refuse to stand down. They're the splitters, no one else. But nonetheless, that vote, that decision to stand down was done in good faith. It was a recognition of the reality of first past the post. I think it was a brave decision. And it was our attempt, at blocking the concerted attempt by the Remain Alliance, informally led by Corbyn's Labour Party, for a second referendum. And that is a real and present danger, and we weren't going to allow that to happen, and we aren't going to allow it. We know the lengths that the establishment will go to derail Brexit. We aren't here to let the Tories off lightly, but we are here to stop Remain winning. We aren't here because we think Boris's treaty or withdrawal agreement delivers what we want, but we are here to ensure that the Remain establishment are thwarted, finished and humiliated in this election. Now, no one likes any blue-on-blue tensions, but our message is that, but despite that, it drives me mad when Tories continue to demand that the Brexit Party don't stand at all or carry on standing down people. I want to remind everyone that political parties on all sides, led by the Tories, have failed to protect and defend democracy itself over the last 3.5 years. The Tories themselves have only become Brexity because of the pressure put on them by the Brexit Party. The curtain has been ripped away and the anti-democratic truth revealed that it's not just the European Union who are keen to keep voters at a distance from decision-making. Our own political parties and elites are just the same. So in order to change politics for good, in the long term, some short-term painful decisions have been made. We are where we are. Let's ask where we are. We've heard from some of the PPCs. I cannot tell you, having gone up and down the country, the quality and standard of the PPCs that the Brexit Party are standing in this election. From a vast range of backgrounds, they've come together around a shared goal. What's been amazing is since the stand down is the dignity with which hundreds of the PPCs who've stood down, not all, but hundreds of them, have shown such class and solidarity with their fellow PPCs. They've stood in other seats or they've been going out canvassing around supporting their fellow Brexit Party candidates in areas next door. There's a real appetite for change, and those PPCs were not career politicians. They were doing it for principle, and they stand by those principles. It's taken courage. I'm actually inspired and humbled by it. Voting Brexit, for all of us, I think, was originally driven by that desire to define our own future, to take back control of our laws, our trade, our borders, our seas, our economy, our tax, all of those things. But we also wanted, and I think this became very clear in the European elections, a more trustworthy political system at home. And this isn't vague principles because it can manifest in tangible changes, like changing the voting system. We know first past the post does not allow representation properly in the House of Commons. We also know of the problems of postal voting, no more so than people here in Peterborough when it's abused. We know that we need to drastically reform the House of Lords, if not abolish it. We need to do something about a Supreme Court that's turned judicial activism into a real political threat to democracy. Now, I can tell you now that none of the mainstream political parties who are establishment parties will do any of that. You're going to need something like the Brexit Party with the courage to take on the establishment in that way. I think, therefore, that I've learned something over the last few years about establishment parties. They won't cede control of the levers of power easily. We voted to leave the European Union under the slogan, "Take back control." It resonated with so many of us, certainly with me. But because we did take back control, we actually took back control from them because they, the establishment, didn't want us to vote that way. And that challenged their authority. The problem is they want it back. For the Conservatives, who have embraced Brexit, but God knows at long last, because they were forced to, they now want to own Brexit. They want to control Brexit, and I fear they want to neuter Brexit. They are driven by a desire to save the Conservative Party. They're not driven by a desire to give voters more control. They want to restore the status quo. And let me tell you, any new insurgency parties or new movements that demand voters have more control will not be tolerated by them, which is exactly why we need to stand, exactly why we need to make a stand. They want to destroy us. I'm not going to let them. The Tories' slogan is "Get Brexit Done." And I'll know, if you've been out canvassing, that that appeals to millions of voters because they're furious, absolutely exasperated at the endless delays that were meant to wear down our patience and put us off and hope that we'd go home. But I don't really like that slogan, get Brexit done. And one of the PPCs, the Tories, said yesterday, let's get Brexit done and concentrate on other priorities. Because for them, Brexit's a thing you just get over. Boris has talked about a ready-made meal and a microwave meal. Now, I'm a terrible cook, so I rather like microwave meals, and I don't advocate cordon bleu because I couldn't do it. But there's something about that, let's put it in the microwave, get it done and dusted as quickly as possible, that makes me really suspect that the way they see Brexit is a hurdle so that they can take things back to the same old business as usual. That business as usual is politics done behind the backs of voters, done without us. Leaving the Conservatives to do Brexit as quickly as possible without pressure means writing voters out of the script and thwarts any aspiration for change. And then we've got the Labour Party. Now, they have gone full Remain. They just want to ignore Brexit. Labour's sales pitch is for the many. Corbyn, rightly, in my view, and I'll give him this, describes some of the vicious consequences of poverty and austerity meted out by the Tories. But the Labour Party's solutions, which are anti-aspirational, anti-economic growth and development, too often relying on the state to actually have all the power rather than the voters, are actually paternalistic, and they treat working people as though we need nannies or social workers to help us. But at their heart, they don't trust ordinary people to take matters into their own hands at all. And Brexit's the example. I don't know if you've actually seen today's advert that Corbyn has put out, where he says, rather convincingly, very earnestly, do you know what the establishment and the wealthy few are really afraid of? You. And he's got a point there. And then he says, they don't want your voice to be heard. They don't want you to have power. But I'd say to Corbyn, what a bloody nerve. The Labour Party now want power to be retained by the Russells establishment. It's they who are ignoring the voices of the many. And they forget that the establishment, the wealthy few, the multinationals and the banks are the very people who backed Remain. They have turned on the electorate, the Labour Party, and they really should be called out for that. Meanwhile, Labour is offering a unique policy, a historical inquiry into Britain's colonies. No doubt this is part of their politically correct identity politics stuff, designed to make everybody feel guilty for being British, and will amount to a lot of woke proposals. But actually, if the Labour Party, I'll save the Labour Party some time, because I'll tell you something about Britain's colonies. If you ask a historian, you'd realise that those colonies fought behind the banners of national sovereignty and self-determination, the very principles which are ignored and sold out by today's Labour, very important principles that have allowed freedom for people around the world. It's also true that they ignore in the present the colonial expansionism of the EU and its disgraceful treatment of even its own member states. So it treats like colonies and second-class citizens countries like Greece and Italy. So oh, you can clap if you want, sorry. But even those who think that Corbyn's policies might be worth it, despite his betrayal of Brexit and of voters, just to note that the regulatory structures of the EU would block out his plans for nationalisation anyway. And anyone who claims they want major social change, like Corbyn does, but then shows they're too scared and timid of the radical change that Brexit promises, hasn't got the bottle to bring about any domestic changes at all. Don't trust the Labour Party. They want to do to you, not with you. The Brexit Party, to conclude, is the only party that isn't calling for business as usual or more of the same. I want you to imagine what a parliament will look like if it's stuffed full of a majority of Tories, Labour, SNP, Lib Dems, Plaid Cymru, exactly. Same old, usual suspects Do you think anything will change then? No. I want you to imagine what Parliament would feel like if you were a voter, if some anti-establishment insurgents were elected. To stand up, hold them to account. As Michael has said in the EU Parliament in Brussels, the Brexit Party are put on the back seats like naughty children. Our offices are miles away from anyone else. We're treated like dissidents. They don't give us any official speaking time, and when we get it, it's 60 seconds. But we have never shut up, and they regret the day that we were ever there. We need people like Mike Green. We need people like Mike Green to do exactly that in Parliament. My vision of the future is that the decision-making powers are put in the hands of the people. Brexit itself was the first in a series of steps to creating a new kind of politics. And you can't create a new kind of politics if you keep voting for the same old time and again. But it'll take courage. But if voting leave means that voters discovered a sense of themselves, which I think they did, we found ourselves as individuals, as citizens, as a country, then it's time to see through that instinct. Don't hand Brexit over to them. Make sure we keep control of it. Vote Mike Green. If there's no one in your area to vote for, get out and canvass for someone who is. We are not going away. We are here to stay, and we're doing that because we honour the voters, no matter how tough it is. Thank you very much.
Great stuff, well done. Brilliant stuff, Claire. If you're not fired up after that, then check your pulse, because I thought that was absolutely fantastic. And Claire's absolutely right. We've been fighting tooth and nail for our country. And, you know, we're very lucky as a party to have a party leader that not only answers the question, but they're so principled. They've not spent a few years fighting for Brexit. They have spent decades committed, fighting tooth and nail to make sure we leave the European Union. I think you know who I'm talking about, but let's see him in action.
We will get Brexit for Boris, but we won't really leave. We'll be half in, half out. So what we're trying to do is to make sure the job gets finished properly. Yeah. Right, we're off for a pint now.
Can I buy this drink for you? If you don't mind, I'd love to. If you really
of course you can. At the Wellington, quite a reception. Been in Eastwood in the Ashfield constituency this morning. This is an old mining town. Labour to its core, has been for decades. Over 70% of people here voted leave. I tell you what, the reception here this morning has been fantastic. As good as anything I've ever experienced in politics. And all we have to do is to convince them that by getting the Brexit Party voice in Parliament, it's the only way we can ever keep a Conservative government honest. And I think they're beginning to understand that.
Please welcome to the stage, Nigel Farage.
Good morning, Peterborough. Good morning. It's great to be back here now. As far as the general election's concerned, what do you think of it so far? Yeah, well, that's right. And that actually, I think, is the response. I can't, as somebody that's watched general elections and thought about them for 45 years, I cannot think of any campaign like this that so far is failing to inspire on such an extraordinary scale. It's remarkable. Every day we get promises. 100 billion for this, 200 billion for that. We're told this morning that if the Conservatives win, it'll be life sentences for child murderers. Really? We've heard it all before, haven't we? We've heard all these promises being made by both sides before, and my impression is that nobody actually believes a single word they're being told. I think the lack of inspiration is greater, I have to say, on the Labour side than it is on the Conservative side. You know, the parts of the country that I've been to, and you just saw that video of where I was on Friday, an old North Nottinghamshire mining town where in the past, for the last 100 years, they've weighed the Labour vote. No need to count it. And yet, virtually everybody I spoke to felt that the Labour Party of today was a North London intellectuals, move way to the left and led by somebody who wasn't even a patriot and didn't really believe in the country. So this utter disconnect is huge. So I think the one prediction I'm going to make already is that it'll be a low turnout unless parties like us can inspire people to go out and vote for change. It does look like Boris will be the biggest party. It does look like he'll probably get a small majority. But someone out there needs to inspire people. And the sheer negativity that we've been met with is remarkable. And that makes Peterborough a great place to be, because Peterborough disproves much of what is being said and written. You see, it's said that we will split the Conservative vote. If you vote for the Brexit Party, Jeremy Corbyn and the Marxist mob will take the country over. You've heard that over the course of the last couple of weeks. Well, let's just think that through in this constituency of Peterborough. In 2015, when I led UKIP here in Peterborough, UKIP got a big, solid 16% of the vote, and the Conservative, Stuart Jackson, ERG member, Eurosceptic, won the seat. When it came to 2017, UKIP decided we won't stand against Stuart Jackson because we might split the Leave vote, and we'd much rather an ERG member won than someone from the Labour Party. So UKIP didn't stand. And guess what? Stuart Jackson lost to the Labour Party. And what so many in the commentariat simply cannot get their heads around is that being Eurosceptic, believing we should not be part of the European Union, believing we should be independent, believing we should control our borders and have sensible immigration policies, these are not the preserve of centre-right Conservative voters. Millions of Labour voters believe in these things, perhaps even more strongly than those in the Conservative Party. And a large number of those Labour voters, they'll vote for us, they'll vote for the Brexit Party. They did in the European elections just a few months ago. Indeed, many of our highest scores came in strong traditional Labour areas. But these voters will never vote Conservative. They wouldn't vote Conservative if you paid them. So the idea that a vote for the Brexit Party puts Corbyn into Downing Street is wrong and utterly disproved by history here. The other argument, of course, is that actually we will split the Conservatives' vote, as if the Conservatives are the true champions of Brexit. I don't think so. In fact, if it wasn't for us, Theresa May would still be Prime Minister, and we'd still be limping along as the laughingstock of the world. Not that we've risen too far from that yet, I have to say. But look at what happened here. Look at what happened here in the by-election this summer. It was it not, a two-horse race? Two-horse race between us and the Labour Party. And the Conservatives came a very distant third. They split our vote. If they hadn't been here, we would have won this seat and not the Labour Party. So Peterborough disproves many of the fallacies that you will read. Let's be frank, We're the only party that actually, really, truly, in our hearts and our souls, believe in Brexit. We want this country to be free and independent. We want no part of the institutions of the European Union, and that is why we were so opposed to Theresa May's appalling sellout. It's why we were so opposed to what Boris Johnson brought back from Brussels, which really wasn't terribly different from what we'd seen before. And I do understand the sense of Brexhaustion that there is in the country. We've kind of had enough of all of this, haven't we? And we'd rather get it done. But getting it done is one thing. Getting it done properly is another. Now look, promises that are made by Boris Johnson are never, of course, written in stone. But the fact that we exist and the fact that they were so worried about us, particularly in the south and the southwest of England, led him to move his position, to say we're going to negotiate a Canada-style trade deal without political alignment. And I took the view that if the governing party of the day is saying the right thing, very difficult for us directly in those seats they hold to challenge them. So our job is to keep him to his promises, to keep him moving away from political and regulatory alignment and moving towards us being genuinely free. So we are going to fight like crazy in these Labour seats in England and Wales, and we've got to pick up support from both sides of the argument. Labour have literally not just broken their promises, but betrayed 5 million of their own voters who voted leave and are now facing a second referendum. The one articulated by Diane Abbott on Question Time the other week. Seems to be the easiest way to get a laugh in this country at the moment. Just mention Diane Abbott. But she made the point they'd negotiate a new deal with Brussels, put it to a referendum, and then campaign against the deal that they'd negotiated. I mean, you couldn't really make this stuff up. Labour are now a party of a second referendum and want to offer a false choice of Remain versus a form of Remain. So we're clearly going after those Labour voters, and we will take a lot of Labour votes. But in our key target seats, in the ones where we need to get over the line, we also need the Conservatives to understand one thing. I did make a big and generous gesture to the Conservatives. Didn't get actually much back in return, apart from abuse. But if you think about this election, actually, there are 650 individual by-elections going on. Because we identify now as being Leave or Remain above a party affiliation. So on both the Remain side of this and the Leave side of this, people will be working out, seat by seat, what the best thing to do is. And in many of these seats where we're the challenger, we're appealing directly to Conservative voters. We stand for Brexit. We want to get this done. We need you to vote tactically, to lend us your support in those constituencies to get us over the line. Because I am certain of one thing. If we don't get the Brexit Party voice there in Westminster, it becomes very easy for promises that have been made to be forgotten. There will be no proper Brexit without the Brexit Party, and that, I think, is the message in seats in which we're campaigning so hard. And it's also vital, I think, that people understand, for us, this is about more than Brexit. You know, we want to change politics for good because we think the entire system is rotten. We have a first-past-the-post electoral system that may well have worked quite well 100 years ago, 200 years ago. But now what we're being told is we have a binary choice between two leaders who, between them, haven't got 2/3 of the support of the country. It doesn't work anymore. And there are millions of people who simply don't vote anymore because they know that it's a safe Labour seat or it's a safe Conservative seat, and they can't see the point of turning out to vote. And what we get with two-party politics, and we'll see it tonight, we'll see a leaders' debate tonight where they both slag each other off, and where effectively they're saying, you think I'm bad? Look at the other guy. First past the post politics gives us very, very negative campaigning. I actually think an element of proportionality, and we might all start saying to the electorate, vote for us because this is what we believe in. So I do think electoral reform is vital. I do think the postal voting system that none of the parties want to amend, despite the fact in this very city people have been to prison for postal vote fraud. We're the one party. We're the one party that actually wants change. We're the one party saying having an election and going back to the rotten way of doing things is not what the country needs. Brexit has exposed how failed Westminster is, how out of touch Westminster is. So we want to change the postal voting system. And I think the way that honours in this country are dished out as political rewards or perhaps even incentives, if you get the direction I'm generally heading in, I think it's absolutely corrupt to its fingertips, and the sooner we abolish a House of Lords that is full of political placemates and replace it with an elected upper chamber, the better and healthier our democracy will be. And I think we need to be more radical still, because what that referendum did, it actually exposed how out of touch career politics in Westminster is with the way that people feel. And I absolutely think that we must have in law the right of a citizen's initiative. If enough of us, not a frivolous number, but if enough of us want to have a referendum on a big key issue where Westminster doesn't reflect our view, we need to have the right to call referendums and a written constitution to make sure the results of those are legally binding. Everybody in Westminster thinks it's fine. We can just go back to normal. We can't go back to normal. The breakdown of trust between the electors and the elected is complete. They are acting as the masters and treating us like the servants. Get some radical Brexit Party voices into Westminster, and once again, we will become the masters and they will be our servants. Thank you.
I'm sure you'll agree with me, he's on absolute top form, and we need him to be. We've got time for a few questions now we've taken. Nigel, David asks, what's the minimum amount of MPs we would need to create maximum effect?
Well, who's to say? That depends on the numbers. I mean, what you can say is that for the last 2 years, the DUP, with 10 seats, actually held the balance of power in Westminster and had really influence way above their size. None of us know how the mathematics of this next Parliament are going to cut. What I do know is if we don't have the Brexit Party voice in that Parliament, Brexit, once again, will be sold down the river by the Conservatives. They did it under Mrs May, they'll do it again. We have got to prevent that, and that's the incentive for people to go out and lend us their votes. Whether they're Labour or Conservative, lend us their votes. Boris with a majority will give us a form of Brexit that I fear, if he doesn't stick to those promises, would be Brexit in name only. We want a proper Brexit. We want to be free. We genuinely believe this country will do so much better once we're in control.
Margaret asked the question, which I think a lot of people around here will be asking, how can we prevent the misuse of postal votes?
Well, I mean, you know, postal voting used to be, if you worked overseas or you were 94 and infirm, you applied for a postal vote, you gave a reason for wanting a postal vote, and that postal vote was granted. Postal voting used to account for 2 to 3% of the turnout in an election. In some of the by-elections recently, one not too far from here, the postal vote turnout was nearer 30%. And, you know, I have physically watched in a northern constituency, in a by-election, I have watched the postman delivering postal votes through doors, and I've also watched a party canvasser following the postman down the street and knocking on the door a few minutes after the postal vote has landed and saying to Mrs. Smith, who's 91, I've come to collect your postal vote. It is open to intimidation, it is open to fraud, it is open to abuse, and we've seen case after case all over this country of abuse of this system. I suggest the way we stop it, getting back to the question, Michael, let's completely scrap the current postal voting register and start again, and people need to give a reason why they want a postal vote.
And a final question from another David, which is quite an open-ended question. When are they going to do Brexit, Nigel? Do we know? Have we got a date?
Well, getting Brexit done, of course, you know, I mean, that is quite clever, isn't it? Boris's slogan's quite clever. Let's get Brexit done, because we all want Brexit done. And it's interesting to see how many people who voted Remain now say, you know what? We're Democrats. Let's just get this done. Let's deliver on the will of the people. But if we finish up with a Brexit, where we go into 3 more years of negotiations, if we finish up with a Brexit, where everything from financial services to fisheries will be tied to EU rules, if we finish up with a Brexit, where our state aid rules will be such that we couldn't even help British Steel or any other company, if we finish up so aligned that we can't sign trade deals with the USA or any other Commonwealth country, then it won't be Brexit, will it? It'll be Brexit in name only. And yet, given how firm public opinion is on our side, and isn't it great to see that the People's Vote campaign, the campaign for a second referendum, is on the verge of closure. I'm very, very pleased about that. You know, we are so close in many ways now. We have shifted the centre of gravity of this debate. The Brexit Party reset the whole thing in the European elections earlier on this year. We are in many ways so close to getting something that really does resemble Brexit. So I'm still buoyed with optimism, but as I've seen through 25 years, you know, Jimmy Goldsmith's referendum party made the Tories promise not to join the euro without a referendum. UKIP forced Cameron into offering a referendum that he never wanted to give. And without outside pressure, the Conservatives will never do this job properly. And it's the Brexit Party's job to finish this off and to see that we become an independent, self-governing nation.
So, there really is only one question, folks. Are you ready to help us change politics for good? Yeah. Up on your feet, let's get the boards up. There you go. Let's see them, come on. Don't be shy. Great stuff. Thank you so much for coming. And fantastic stuff. We're going to change politics for good. It's great to see you here today. Let's get it done. Very good. Good stuff. Thank you.